Another best practice we learned is passive house. And the best way that I have found to describe passive house is comparing it to what it's not. So our current development model in the US is you build out of 2x4s, which gives you in total a 5-inch wall, and you put insulation in there, and you have a very large air conditioner or heating unit that runs pretty much all the time. Passive house flips that around. You have 16-inch thick walls with a little tiny heater or air conditioner that hardly ever runs, and you can drop your energy consumption from $119 to $26. In essence, you're putting a sweater around the building, and you're both reducing your mechanical costs because your air conditioning costs a lot less, but more important than that, you're reducing your operating expenses, which is how we're able to do this and have a higher profitable model than the current business case. The other thing that passive house delivers is what's called thermal comfort. So you have uh, everyone knows of apartments or homes where during certain months of the year you can't go into those places. They're too cold, they're too hot. Passive house, you don't have that. Everything is, because of the lack of thermal bridges, your floors stay warm. You don't have places where you are needing gloves to sit and watch TV or wear a hat. Um, and a lot of people are being attracted to passive house not because of the economics or the energy efficiency, but just because of the fact that these buildings are so much more comfortable and livable. And um, in essence, that's why we build buildings, because we don't want to be cold and we don't want to be hot. And passive house delivers that second to none. So if you compare a similar sized high-rise building to Second and Delaware, that has lots of thermal bridges, and this is just standard practice. You have concrete that goes right out to a curtain wall glass, and we build a glass skin, and it supposedly meets energy code, although I would question it if you really dug in. Um, Second and Delaware is larger than this building, but this building needs 40 million kilobtu's of energy to be heated, powered, and cooled. Second and Delaware, because of proper planning and eliminating thermal bridging and building the passive house, we need 4.5. That is a huge reduction. And when 70% of our building emissions, carbon emissions, come from buildings, if we can, with proper design and adding insulation and putting the right size air conditioning, have this type of reduction, there's a tremendous business case and opportunity, which I'll show you in a few slides ahead. There's also a moral obligation to do the right thing here. We're talking about buildings that will last decades, if not longer, and with such a impact on the climate, we think that this is really the only way to build. So these are a lot of numbers, and I'm going to try to walk you through the way we see the business case. So this first column here, if we look at Second and Delaware as an example, and these aren't the exact numbers of Second and Delaware, but it gives you an example of what we're doing and how we're thinking about it. 321,000 square feet, 276 units, have an average of 1,100 square feet per unit. This first column is our costs for a select number of divisions that get impacted by what we're talking about tonight. Second column is if you were to build it conventional stick, the way merchant builders build. So if we take concrete versus wood, we obviously have a higher cost, $27 a square foot. Insulation, we have slightly more. Windows, we have slightly more. We have triple glazed windows. But if you look at our flooring, we have polished concrete floors. We have no flooring cost because it's all in the concrete cost. Our drywall is less because, as I showed you in that rendering, we expose some of our drywall, our ceilings, and our exterior walls as accent walls. Our exterior is lower cost because our concrete sandwich wall gives us practically our finished exterior wall. Our mechanical cost, and this is what's really interesting, is lower for passive house because we have less tonnage and less heating that's needed. So net, we look at $85 compared to $66. There is a $19 a square foot premium to building both passive house and a building that will last what we charged our designers with it'll last more than 200 years. And we think this is important because the embodied energy in our buildings we build have a huge impact on the climate. So how do we pay for this $19 a square foot? Well, if we have a $119 market rate utility, so if you go to a building next door and someone is paying utilities and their rent, they're paying on average $119. We don't think that people will pay more to be green, but we don't think that they will expect to pay less. So we include a $119 utility in the rent, which means if you go next door, if you go to our project, you're paying the same utility cost. But you have a much lower carbon footprint if you're in one of our buildings. So we take the $92 a month savings times 12 months a year, comes out to $1,104 per unit in savings, times 276 units is $304,000. Multifamily projects are selling at a 4 to 5% cap rate, which gives us a $7.16 million increased value in the building from day one. Not in 10 years, not in 5 years, not in 20 years, but day one, an appraiser is valuing our building $7.1 million more, which is $22 more than the stick-built case, which is about $3 more than the stick-built business case model today. So if we can, and we can borrow all that money at 83% loan to value so that we're not having to put any more equity in these projects to do this because we can borrow it to do it. So you are having a higher first cost, but your lower operating expenses gives you a higher value and a higher profit margin. And if you look at this from a merchant builder standpoint, I'll just kind of cut to the bottom line. If you're building a stick-built building of this size, you're looking at a $4.2 million profit. If you're building a passive house concrete that lasts a lot longer with lower operating expenses and higher NOI, you have a $9 million profit. So we think that there is a huge market for this, and merchant builders will change one of two ways. One, that they wake up to this opportunity. Two, that life insurance companies, pension funds, and communities and city councils and planning commissions insist on this. They will have to get with the picture and build for the 21st century. But either way, they're able to make more money doing so.
If a developer is planning, I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear you say it. If a developer is planning not to hold the property for 30, 40 years, but to sell the units and say, this is going to be a condominium type project, and I want to get out and get my money out in 5 years after I build this. So first cost would seem to be his greatest concern. How does that fit into this calculation?
Well, so if you're talking about a condominium project where you're selling to end users, people that are going to buy fee simple ownership in each unit, there's an educational component there to say this product that we're developing is going to first and foremost, I think, have a higher thermal comfort than the product across the street. And at the same time, you're going to have a lower cost of ownership. And because of that lower cost of ownership, you can pay a little bit more to have both thermal comfort, which you quantify that however you want, but the business case is that you're still making a better financial return based on this. So there's an education component. If you're not talking about condominiums and you're talking about rental property, which is the vast majority of what is being built right now, because it's pretty hard to get insurance to build a condominium these days. The lawsuits that come out of condominium developments make it very, let's just say, not attractive to do that. So we also have a rent by choice mentality because people are wanting and needing to be able to be flexible and move and be mobile. So I think the majority of those 45 million housing units are going to be for rent product that is largely bought and sold by institutional investors, life insurance companies, pension funds, and REITs. Now, they buy real estate based on what is the net operating income. And if you have a higher net operating income with a passive house project, they will pay you more for that. Not in 20 years or in 10 years, but today. So on the institutional for rent property, there's no education that needs to be done whatsoever. You simply do the appraisal, you show what the net operating income is. They then say, okay, I want a 4% return or a 5% return. 5% is easy because you multiply that net operating income by 20 times, and that gets you the value. So for every dollar of energy utilities saved, the REIT pension fund or life insurance company will pay you $20 more for the building. So that's not over 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. That's just today because they're looking at cash flow. That's what anyone who buys commercial real estate is looking at cash flow, not at payback. So passive house is the perfect example of creating value by increasing the cash flow of a project without adding more cost on a first cost basis. So you can be more profitable.